Good morning, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody to begin with. And I just wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar this morning. This is the Joint Systems Implementation and Office of Environmental Management webinar, specifically for Interchange, the Interchange process. That's the subject for today. And first of all, I wanted to let everybody know that this webinar will be recorded, and it will be posted in both offices' websites for your convenience. And in addition to that, I just wanted to, well, besides welcoming everybody, I just wanted to introduce what we're going to be talking about today during the webinar and kind of introduce our team today. So our agenda for today, we're going to do, like I said, some introductions. We will be talking about the interchange access request process. We will mention the Federal Highway Administration Interstate System Access Policy, they update you all on that. And we'll also talk about the interchange access request approval process. In addition, we will touch on the approval authorities for the interchange access request, or IARs. We will also talk about the safety analysis. We updated this a little bit in our recent update for the user's guide. And also we will be talking about the interchange access request review, the IAR or interchange access request reevaluation. And then we'll have our folks here from the Office of Environmental Management talk about the PD&E process. And we'll give you some updates on what's coming up here soon with other training and webinars. And it's important for us to mention to the attendees that we have over 300 registered attendees today for this webinar, that professional credits will be available, and for 1.5 hours for PDHs and AICP credits as well. So here's our team for today. Again, my name is Maria Overton, and I am the Systems Management Manager for the Systems Implementation Office here in Central Office, and I'll let everybody else in the room introduce themselves.
Victor Muchuluza, I'm the State Environmental Development Engineer within the Office of Environmental Management in Central Office.
Good morning, I'm Andrew Young. I'm the State Interchange Review Coordinator for FDOT Central Office.
I'm Martha Hodgson with the Environmental Management Office.
Good morning, Vikram Wadhawan with Hanson Professional Services. I'm consultant to FDOT Systems Implementation Office.
Okay, and also I wanted to let everybody know that for the sake of time and considering the size of the group this morning, that we will have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar. But however, feel free to enter any questions during the webinar on the chat box, and we will do our very best to catch up and answer your questions as we see them. So I'm gonna let Andrew start his part of the presentation this morning, and hope you enjoy it.
All right, thank you, Maria. Like Maria said, I'm Andrew Young. I'm the State Interchange Review Coordinator. I'm going to be running through the core of our material today. And so first, we're going to dive into interchange access requests and some of the criteria involved with this process. So an interchange access request is a request for new or modified access to the interstate highway system, as well as non-interstate limited access facilities that are on the state highway system. An interchange access request shows that a proposed interchange proposal is viable based on safety, operational, and engineering criteria. The requester of an IAR can be from FDOT, local government, an MPO, or TPO. And before we move on, it's important to note that a requester must be a government entity. It cannot be a private organization or developer. Our interchange access request user's guide serves as the guideline for developing an interchange access request. This guide was first released in December of 2002, and it was updated again in March of 2015. We recently went through the update process again, and it was released this past month, January. And some of the updates to this version include the incorporation of the new Federal Highway Administration policy, our updated safety analysis methodology, our reevaluation criteria for interchange access requests. This has changed slightly from the previous user's guide version. We've made some minor tweaks to our approval authorities tables. These are the tables outlining the individuals who are needed to sign off on various projects. We've also provided guidance related to process, policies, technical requirements, and documentation to satisfy the state and federal requirements. And this user's guide is available online at the link included below. So for common IAR documents include a methodology letter of understanding, or MLOU. This is required for all IJRs and IMRs. However, for IOAR projects, the DIRC, or District Interchange Review Committee, will determine the need for an MLOU. An interchange justification report is conducted for an entirely new access to the interstate, and it is the most highly detailed analysis of any access request. An interchange modification report is done for any modifications that are going to be done to an existing access point. And an interchange operational analysis report, or IOAR, is conducted for minor modifications to existing interchanges. We have methodology meetings as part of our process. The requester and IRC start drafting an MLOU once a project need is determined. The MLOU is used to reach a consensus among all stakeholders. And the meeting should be conducted to discuss the access proposal and the MLOU for the access request. Any fatal flaws to the IAR acceptance should be identified and resolved at these meetings. The MLOU does not serve as a scope of work for the project. Any work done prior to the approval is at risk. All meeting minutes should be documented, and we have an MLOU template for you to use when developing this document. It is included on our website as well as on the link included on this slide. So for the review and acceptance of an MLOU, all stakeholders shall accept and sign the MLOU after they concur with the MLOU requirements and need. The work performed by the requester prior to the acceptance is at risk, as I mentioned on the previous slide. The requester shall prepare amendments, should they be asked for, and submit them for approval. All parties must approve the amendment. Now let's talk about interchange access reports. They are developed as a standalone document that is consistent with the agreed upon MLOU. If other reports are available or were conducted in the past, relevant information should be summarized in the most up-to-date version. It must be understandable to the unfamiliar reader. And this report determines the safety, operational, and engineering acceptability of the IAR. And of course, the report must address the FHWA's 2 policy points, which we will talk about in the next slides. This slide shows the documentation requirements that are needed. We must have an executive summary, which includes discussion of FHWA's 2 policy points and how they are being met. We must indicate our purpose and need and explain that in the document. Must include our methodology, what type of analysis we're going to be used, what type of software is going to be conducted for the traffic analysis, what type of model we're going to use, etc. We'll have an existing conditions report, conduct our safety analysis, outline our future conditions, explain our alternatives analysis, make sure we include a funding plan and schedule, and include our final recommendation. And these will be determined by the IRC during the MLOU development phase. Interchange access requests shall be consistent with adopted statewide and local transportation plans. It shall consider all fatal flaws and environmental issues that might influence the NEPA compliance phase of the project. And a funding plan must be in place prior to the approval of the IAR proposal. All right, now let's talk about the Federal Highway Interstate Policy Update. So the Federal Highway Administration has a policy entitled Access to the Interstate System. This was originally published in the Federal Register on October 22 of 1990, and it was last modified in May of last year, May of 2017, and this policy replaces the old August 2009 policy, which many of you are familiar with, had the 8 policy point criteria. However, the new policy focuses only on technical feasibility of the proposed changes in terms of safety, operations, and engineering acceptability, or SO&E. All ongoing and new interchange access requests will follow the new policy. The old 8 policy points from the previous 2009 policy are being replaced entirely with these new 2 policy points. We've included a slide here to show the comparison between the 2 policies, the 8 and now the 8 from the previous and the 2 for the new. So the old policy point 1 is no longer applicable. It is being evaluated in the purpose and need during PD&E. Old policy point 2 is no longer applicable. It is addressed and evaluated during the alternatives analysis of PD&E. Old policy point 3 is currently our new policy point 1. Old policy point 4 is now policy point 2. Policy point 5 is not applicable. It is addressed during PD&E through planning consistency. Old policy point 6 is not applicable. It is addressed during NEPA during the alternative development and planning consistency process. Old policy point 7 is not applicable. It is addressed during NEPA through public involvement. Old policy point 8 is not applicable. It is addressed during NEPA through the environmental analysis. All right, so our new policy point 1, there's a lot of text here from the FHWA policy, but the red text is the summary of what the policy point is essentially getting at. Basically, the IAR does not have a significant adverse impact on the operation and safety of the freeway system. And policy point 2 is that the proposed access connects to a public road only and will provide for all traffic movements. So we cannot be providing access to a private driveway or any non-public facility. All right, now we're going to talk about the approval process. So the approval process consists of 2 parts. The first part is the safety, operational, and engineering acceptability. Or PD&E study. So for the SO&E process, that's where we meet our compliance with Federal Highway's 2 policy points, as well as FDOT's procedure. It's where we indicate the access proposal is a viable alternative to include in the environmental analysis stage. For the PD&E process, it can be performed concurrently with the IAR or following the SO&E acceptance. However, approval can only occur following SO&E acceptance. NEPA documents are prepared per our guidelines and requirements outlined in the PD&E manual, and we've included a link to that manual on this slide. This 2-part process offers flexibility to obtain the SO&E acceptability prior to completing the environmental review and approval process. All right, this slide is going to go through our updated IAR flowchart. So we start with our request for access. Our next step is having coordination meetings with our various program offices, such as the requester, the district IRC, central office, and FHWA. Once that step has been complete, we work on developing our methodology letter of understanding. Once that is approved, we move to drafting our SO&E report submittal, which is QA/QC'd by the district and central office. Now, does the SO&E comply with the policy points and FDOT procedure? If no, then we have to go back and revisit our MLOU. If yes, then we make our determination of safety, operational, and engineering acceptability. NEPA can be done as a separate process parallel to the IAR. Once we obtain our NEPA approval, the district IRC submits a letter to FHWA notifying that the IAR, SO&E, and NEPA approval are consistent. The Federal Highway Administration confirms that the concept is the same in SO&E and NEPA and signs the letter. This is the point where the affirmative determination is made. We also have included criteria for revaluations. If there is a time lapse where a project has not progressed to construction within 3 years of the signed letter from FHWA, then whenever the next phase is initiated, whether that be design build, etc., we have to do a check. This check has to make sure that the IAR concept or other project conditions have, whether they have changed significantly since the IAR approval. We need to check to make sure land uses, if that's changed, if there's a new traffic demand model, etc. If there has been changes to the concept or conditions, then we need to look at, conduct an IAR reevaluation. And our reevaluation requirements are outlined in our Interchange Access Request User's Guide. So then we start back over at coordination meetings with the various stakeholders for that process. If the concept has not changed, then we do not need to conduct a reevaluation. The district IRC will document no change, and the district IRC will coordinate with Federal Highway Administration and Central Office to inform of no change. Then we can proceed with our project. All right, now we're going to talk about the project development process. So we all want to get to construction, that's at the end of the process. However, we start with our planning. This is where we conduct master plans, corridor studies. We move that then into PD&E studies, which lead into final design. Right-of-way is also incorporated at that end of the process. But our interchange access request can be conducted during planning, PD&E, or the final design process. All right, now we're going to talk about the approval authorities and the various stakeholders. So the requester is the individual who is requesting the change in access to the interchange. They will develop, sign, and submit to the IRC a methodology letter of understanding documenting the agreed upon methodology and perform appropriate quality control. The interchange review coordinator is each district has one, and they are the point of contact for all requesters. They are responsible for quality control and establish the basis for acceptance, criteria, level of coordination, and scope of the analysis and documentation. The state interchange review coordinator, which is myself, is responsible for providing statewide guidance for rules, policies, and procedures related to IAR reviews, ensures consistency, and coordinates with Federal Highway, the district's IRCs, and the Florida Turnpike Enterprise IRC. The systems management administrator is responsible for approval of the IARs after they have been reviewed by the SIRC. They also coordinate with FHWA on matters related to interchange projects and FDOT processes. And finally, the Federal Highway Administration is responsible for protecting the structural and operational integrity of the interstate. The FHWA has a district transportation engineer responsible for each district, and they are the point of contact for the division office. We have a programmatic agreement in place with the Federal Highway Administration. This programmatic agreement between the Federal Highway Administration Florida Division and the Florida Department of Transportation regarding the review and approval of specific types of changes in interstate system access. This was signed on April 2nd of 2015. So key points for this programmatic agreement: it allows FDOT to have more control on the IAR process. It allows us to streamline and expedite the review and approval of IARs. And FHWA still provides their final approval, which is the affirmative determination, after the completion of PD&E. The IARs that are eligible for the programmatic agreement, so not every IAR project is included under the PA process. FHWA Division Office and FDOT have established the PA status must be established during the initiation phase. And the following IARs are included under the PA. So new and major modifications to service interchanges that are outside TMAs. TMAs are transportation management areas. Modifications to service interchanges that are within TMAs, and completion of partial interchanges. Please refer to our Interchange Access Request User's Guide for more information on the programmatic agreement. All right, so our approval authority tables, I'm going to talk quickly about these. For our non-programmatic projects, so these are projects that get reviewed and signed by Federal Highway. This table didn't change during our update process, but it's important to note that the only change was now the Systems Management Administrator is signing for Central Office in place of the SIRC. For the programmatic projects, this is our table. Again, the only change was the SIRC is being replaced by the Systems Management Administrator. And our proposed acceptance table for tolling authorities is included here. And again, the Systems Management Administrator is now signing for in place of the SIRC. All right, let's talk some district coordination. The IAR should take an interdisciplinary approach. Interchange coordination meetings must be held for each IAR proposal. Staff should include other division offices such as environmental management, design, traffic ops, structures, safety, right-of-way, maintenance and program management. An FHWA and the State Interchange Review Coordinator must be invited to these coordination meetings. All right, now let's touch on our safety analysis. The IARs require an updated safety analysis methodology. So for our existing conditions, we calculate our crash rates, we produce our crash diagrams, write a description of existing crash trends, and then we document in the report. For IOARs, very much the same. However, we also incorporate our crash modification estimation through the use of CMS. For IMRs, we add on to that analysis where we include our safety performance functions, we incorporate our empirical Bayes method, and then we also do a benefit cost analysis. And for an IJR project, it's one less step of the IMR. We basically the same as an IMR, we just don't do the empirical Bayes. Safety analysis is based on the procedures included in the Highway Safety Manual. And also, please see section 3.3 of our user's guide for further detail regarding safety analysis. We also have another webinar coming up on March 8th where we are going to dive into more discussion and go into more detail on this safety analysis methodology. But we just wanted to provide a quick overview in this presentation. All right, interchange access request review. So for the IAR review process, the originator performs the QC and submits the IAR. The IRC conducts a review. Once the review is complete, there is concurrence by the originator. The originator incorporates any comments that were submitted through the review process. This verification is checked by the IRC again. Once comments are addressed satisfactorily, if comments are not addressed satisfactorily, then we go back to concurrence by the originator and we go through that process again. If comments have all been addressed, then the IRC submits the IAR to the State Interchange Review Coordinator for quality assurance. The SIRC checks to make sure that the criteria is satisfied. If it is not, it goes back for review by the district IRC. If all criteria is satisfied, then the IAR is submitted to FHWA as applicable. All right, now we're going to talk about the reevaluations. Reevaluations are required for one or more of the following conditions. If there's a change in an approved IAR design concept, if there are significant changes in conditions such as traffic characteristics, land use, environment, etc. If there's a failure of the IAR to progress to the construction phase within 3 years of approval, this is that time lapse we discussed earlier. The approval of the IAR occurs after SO&E affirmative determination and NEPA parts are complete. An MLOU shall be prepared for all IAR reevaluations. We want to make note here that our office is working on developing a bulletin to be for future inclusion in the FDOT design manual. And this bulletin will address our revaluation criteria. If there's a change in approved access design concept, these can be due to environmental impacts, changes during the design phase, changes during the design build or P3 concept. If there's a change in conditions, we look to see if there's a change in projected traffic demand, a change in land use, if there's been any changes in roadway configuration or design, and finally, if there's any environmental commitments that we need to make note of. Finally, for the time lapse before construction, the need for a reevaluation will be determined if construction does not begin within 3 years of IAR approval or affirmative determination. The district IRC will determine need for reevaluation in coordination with central office and FHWA. FHWA only gets involved in that step when it's a non-programmatic project. Reevaluation shall demonstrate the need for the project is still viable. Depending on the amount of lapsed time and change in project area conditions, a new IAR could be required instead of a reevaluation. IAR reevaluation types and requirements are summarized in our following table, and this table is also available in our Interchange Access Request User's Guide. All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Victor Mucharuza from our Office of Environmental Management, and he is going to run through the PD&E process.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. My presentation is going to cover a little bit more of the interchange access request within the PD&E study process. I'm going to be covering those PD&E projects which has interchange access request only. And these PD&E projects are done on interstate highways. Since the release of the new police point, which are 2 compared to 8 police points, Edward showed you the table which compare the old and the new. There's a lot of questions on how the other 6 police points are addressed during PD&E studies. So hopefully coming out of this presentation, you should be able to understand how those 6 police points are being addressed within the PD&E process. So to start with, reciting a new memo which released the new interstate police point. There's some of the language in there that FHWA has identified several areas where the current police may be streamlined to eliminate duplication with other project reviews, and other project reviews being NEPA reviews or other planning processes. And then the memo went ahead and saying that consideration of social, economic, environmental impacts and planning consideration will be addressed through the NEPA review of the project. So I kind of underline will be addressed because for some, that tense is kind of like confusing others, asking us how we will be addressing social, economic, and environmental impacts, policy points within the NEPA process. Then the memo went on and said that the change will eliminate the potential for duplicative analysis of those issues in the state DOT, interstate access report, and the NEPA documentation. So hopefully coming from this presentation, you'll be able to see the intersection of the interchange access request process and the NEPA process and how FDOT is streamlining these 2 processes. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about what is FDOT project development process. Edward covered it some. So any projects begin with a need, which is a problem, and the project will try to solve that need. It ends with construction, which can be new corridor crossing the interstate with a potential for a new access, or major modification to the interstate or arterial, which has a potential to modify the interchange, or minor modification to the interstate or arterial with a potential to modify the interchange to the interstate. So the process to get to construction involves planning phase, PD&E phase, design, right-of-way, and construction. For new construction, reconstruction projects, these projects go through the PD&E process, and they are classified as Type 2 categorical exclusion or Type 2 CE, environmental assessments or EA, and EISs, environmental impact studies. So we have 3 classes of actions for these projects which goes through the PD&E process. So projects on existing corridors or projects on new corridors may have a potential to go through PD&E phase, sorry. However, there are other projects which do not have PD&E phase. These are minor projects, and they are categorically excluded from NEPA. So project on existing corridors most likely may require preparation of IMR or IOR, as Edward said. So I'm not going to go back and say what is IMR or IOR. Of course, to complete the project life cycle, you should be able to go through operation and maintenance, and then hopefully you can go back to the need, and then the process can start over. So what is PD&E study? PD&E study is a study or process which is done by FDOT to comply with the NEPA and other related federal and state environmental laws, regulations, and executive orders. We have several issues which we're dealing with during PD&E. We have natural environment, human environment, physical environment, cultural environment. All these issues has at least one law, regulation, or executive orders that we need to comply during the PD&E study. And to comply with those involves a lot of analysis. And for those who have done PD&E studies, that's when the things become too complicated. The process to comply with NEPA in Florida is documented within the Project Development Environment Manual. Here is the cover of the new manual. Since 2 years ago, we updated the PD&E manual 2 times. So now we've got a fresh look of that. There will be another update coming in about 4 months. So by June this year, we should have another update. I'm not going to be talking of what we've changed or what we updated within the PD&E manual. If you're interested to see what we have changed, we've got several trainings. You can go to Office of Environmental Management website to see what are those changes. The goal of a PD&E study is to identify the project preferred alternative, and this preferred alternative will be carried over through final design and later will be implemented through construction phase. We're going to be addressing the purpose and need for the project during PD&E study and also performing extensive environmental analysis consistent with the issues for that project, and also perform engineering analysis sufficient to evaluate and document project impacts. The ultimate goal of a PD&E study is to determine location and design concept. Of course, that's a preferred alternative which is to be implemented. Typical activities which are done during PD&E are purpose and need, alternative analysis, evaluation of impacts, public involvement, then preparation of environmental document, and of course, we obtain the approval through location design concept acceptance. Mostly the purpose and need starts during planning of the project. When the project moves into PD&E, we define the purpose and need. There's a lot of needs which are evaluated or refined during PD&E. Can be related to traffic, talk about demand, capacity, safety, such as crash issues or incident issues, roadway or structural deficiencies, system linkages, model interrelation, and economic development. So these are the example of the needs which are driving the projects. We don't expect that one interchange project will have all these needs. You may have one enough to justify the need for the new or modified interchanges. So when we are developing and analyzing alternative, we look at traffic and safety analysis. We document that. We develop alternatives, different alignments, horizontal alignment and profiles. We look at different typical sections, analyzing the extent of impact to the environment as well as needs. Interchanges and intersection concepts are also evaluated during PD&E. And then we compare alternatives one after the other. Of course, we have to evaluate no-build alternative regardless if it does not meet the purpose and need for the project. The goal for alternative analysis in PD&E is to develop concept plans to a level equivalent to phase 1 design plans or 30% design. We are working to make sure we get there. As I said earlier, we've got a lot of environmental analysis which we have to be doing related to social impacts, socioeconomic impacts, cultural impacts, natural impacts, physical impacts, and of course the biggest one is a coordination consultation with resource agencies, which also starts before the project moves to PD&E phase, as I'll show you later on. So, and we'll talk about AER approvals and the NEPA approval. I want to recap why are we doing that. So those are two different federal actions and two approval decisions which are kind of related. They're different, but they are related. So under NEPA approval, December 14, 2016, FHWA assigned their responsibilities for environmental review to FDOT. Under Title 23 United States Code Section 327, which is a transportation delivery program. So what does that mean? From that date, December 14, 2016, all the decisions related to NEPA rest within the Office of Environmental Management. Our director is the one who signs all NEPA documents for highway projects. So FDOT has since assumed all highway projects in Florida whose source of funding comes from FHWA or which constitute federal action through FHWA. Interstate projects, they are federal action. Regardless of federal funding or state funding, if a project involves interstate highway, it is a federal action. So we've assumed responsibilities of approving all these projects under NEPA review process. If you go to the interchange access approval process, as Andrew said, FHWA retain approval of new or revised access points to the interstate system under Title 23 of United States Code, Section 111. And of course, the access approval is through the affirmative determination of a safety, operational, and engineering acceptability done by FHWA or delegated to the department, as Andrew said, after NEPA approval. So to be clear that the final approval is done by FHWA, not us. Although we've assumed responsibilities for FHWA to approve NEPA, we don't have any assumption of the actions related to engineering operational acceptability. So in plain language, I'd say NEPA approval is just environment, and then IAR approval is engineering, which we did not assume engineering decision. I hope that one is clear. Okay, so I'm going to go through again the project development process. Again, start with the need and with construction. And we have to go through all these phases. We talk about planning, PD&E, then design, later on construction. In the planning, we do need analysis. So when we have the need, when we have the problem, maybe the congestion, which needs to modify the ramp or needs a new interchange, we develop the purpose and need for that project. We move on with prioritizing the project through the long-range transportation plan, cost-feasible plan, as well as a strategic intermodal systems cost-feasible plans. During planning also, we do a lot of corridor and sub-area studies and feasibility study. All these are kind of like justifying the need of having the interchange project. And then if, yes, there is a purpose and need for that project, we move on and program that project. Program the PD&E phase, and also we can program other phases such as design, right away, or construction at that time. That one results in development of TIP and STIP programs. And then within environmental review process, we've got ETDM process. ETDM is happening before PD&E study begins. Actually, ETDM informs development of a scope of services for PD&E projects. We consult and coordinate with different resource agencies, which are called ETAT, through the environmental screening tool. They give an opportunity to comment on our projects, identify potential issues, which we may need to be aware of or we may need to avoid on the course of development of the project. ETDM has two planning screen, which happens way before the projects become a project, and the programming screen informing the programming of that project. The ultimate goal of ETDM screening is a determination of the class of action, which can be a type 2 CE or an EA or EAS. And then recently, I think 5 years ago, we came up with a new process, which is called ACE, and ACE stands for Alternative Corridor Evaluation. And this process, the ACE, we look at new corridors. So ACE process is relevant to only new corridors. These are the corridors which has a potential to have an EAS. So we go through the screening, develop several alternatives, screening them, and hopefully we can avoid some of the alternative which has a potential to significantly impact the environment. One of the benefits of using ACE is ability of downgrading a potential an EIS to an EA project. So we encourage the districts and their consultant to use ACE for new corridors because it works hand in hand with the ETDM process. It has its own process. Again, I'm not going to go to the details of that for the sake of time. So after ETDM is done, as I said, we can create the scope of services for that PD&E study and go through the consultant acquisition process. And then after that, the project moves into the PD&E study. I talked about the activities which are done during PD&E studies. So all these activities are kind of like summarized in this graphic. Public involvement is a big one. Planning consistent or physical constraint. You have to make sure that that project is funded for the next phase up to construction. Interchange, intersection analysis, of course, is done there. Traffic and safety analysis, social, cultural, natural, physical impact analysis, refining purpose and need, development and evaluation of alternatives, preparation of design concept plans, and then at the end, you have to prepare environmental document. There are other sub-processes within the PD&E study. I not talk about design exception, design variation can happen during PD&E study, but the biggest one which I want to share with you is a value engineering study, because value engineering study, the outcome of the value engineering study may have a potential to change the alternative. So when you're finishing up with development and evaluation of alternative during PD&E study, before you move into the public hearing of the project, we recommend that value engineering has to be done there. So if you have a new alternative coming from the value engineering study, it can be included in the environmental review process, and the environmental document should include that recommendation coming from the value engineering study. And of course, after public hearing, NEPA is approved. I said earlier, the approval authority rests within the Office of Environmental Management. There is a process which has to go through finalizing environmental document and approval of the NEPA document. I'm not going to go through that process. As I said earlier, if you're interested to know that, we've got some guidance and as well as a training in the Office of Environmental Management website. And when the NEPA is approved, it's authorizing the next phase, which is a design or can be right away. And then after that, design is finalized, detailed design, plan, specification, estimates are prepared. And then depends on the time or the changes in the concept, we perform environmental revaluation or NEPA reevaluation. And the other thing which is related to PD&E study and environmental review process is environmental permits, which are completed during final design of the project. So for the projects which do not have a PD&E study, okay, these are minor projects in scope. Technically, they skip all this PD&E process. So from the need, and some of these projects do not have a planning phase, like talking about resurfacing or bridge replacement projects or other safety projects. They may miss the planning from the need. They get special funding, they get programmed, then the project is scoped, move to the final design, and then the environmental review process is completed by completing a type 1 categorical exclusion checklist, as I'll show you later on. So how does the interchange access request fit in within this pre-construction process? So it can happen in 3 places, can happen in planning, right here. You can have interchange access request, or can happen during PD&E, which most of those requests are now happening during PD&E study, and then can happen during design. So now I'm going to go through one after the other. If you have a new corridor connecting to interstate system and potential of opening a new interchange. Okay, so the PD&E study is not changing. Everything which we have been doing, we'll continue to be doing, or we are doing. We're not doing something new. The IAR, for this case, is going going to be IJR because the new corridor is going to be happening during planning study. What I want to emphasize is the use of alternative corridor evaluation. You can use alternative corridor evaluation to determine the location of the corridor. And of course, if you know where you're going to place your corridor, the interchange also can be analyzed there. So take advantage of that alternative corridor evaluation. Of course, link with ETDM. Edward said FETO form with regard to environmental issues. So all those environmental consideration, although it's not part of the new IJR or IR process, can be used to inform development of IJR through either ACE, alternative corridor evaluation, or ETDM process. Then after that, obtain safety, operation, and engineering acceptability, as Andrew has said. Then if the new interchange is justified, this process provides a flexibility where you can go and modify the long-range transportation plan to add the new interchange project as necessary, and of course move on with programming. When you move to the PD&E phase, what we want is to evaluate IJR alternative again, because the environmental review which is done here is not as comprehensive as what is being done in PD&E study. So we take that alternative and then reevaluate. The goal here is to reuse the information which is prepared in the planning or in the IJR using another process which is called a planning environmental linkage as much as we can. How can we do that? The coordination, which Andrew was kind of like a touch a little bit there. If you're preparing IJR in planning, make sure that you include or you coordinate with environmental folks so that you can use our processes to screen that project. So there may be some conditions that the IJR concept done before PD&E changes because of the reason that Edward said, design of traffic changes. If that happens, then you'll have to reevaluate. You have to reevaluate again. So there's this one here, use the dash one here. Our goal is to have whatever we have from the planning not to be changed during PD&E, but yes, there are some of the conditions which you cannot control. If the concept has changed, it has to go back again into the IJR process being reevaluated and to talk about MLU and things related to that. What I want to point out to that the analysis which is done to support PD&E and the analysis which is done to support IJR with reference to engineering and safety should be the same. We don't expect that we'll have two different engineering safety analysis, one for IJR and another one for PD&E. So whenever the MLU you agree up here, we should be able to adopt and use it for any analysis done during PD&E study. So when two ways. If there's no change, then we can move to finalize the environmental document and then approve NEPA. If there's a change, then we can update the SO and E acceptability and then complete NEPA. Keep in mind that the NEPA approval will not occur until we have the SO and E acceptability determination done. So that for us, that's a check. That's a question which we ask for any interchange project. Do we have SO and E acceptability determination? Then after that, of course, the district IRC will submit a letter to FHWA for IR approval after NEPA is completed. Okay, so modification to existing interchanges or adding new interchanges to existing corridors. Again, the PD&E process is not changing, is the same. Why I'm saying it's not changing is because of the question of how we address the other 6 points. Okay, all those 6 points, we have been doing them in the past and we'll continue to do them. We'll continue to document them appropriately. So IJR, IMR, or IOR may be prepared concurrent with the PD&E study. And this I'll say for a majority of those studies are done this way. IJR, IMR is kind of like a separate sub-process within the PD&E process, more or less like a value engineering, more or less like a design exception, design variation. what we are recommending or emphasizing is use single analysis methodology for both IAR analysis and PD&E study. After the analysis completed, move on to obtain safety, operational, and engineering acceptability. And then you have to summarize and reference IJR, IMR, and IAR analysis in the preliminary engineering report. What is a preliminary engineering report? It's an engineering document prepared during PD&E to summarize all engineering decisions which are made to support the NEPA action. That's why we want either to reference or summarize that IMR into the engineering report. And of course, the report coming from the interchange access process has to be attached to the preliminary engineering report. After that, you complete NEPA, which means you obtain location and design concept acceptance. So we are here, and then you move on into applying for final approval from FHWA, and then move to design. What do we do on minor projects? These are the projects which I say that do not have the PD&E phase. They can move straight from the need all the way to design, or they can go through planning and then go through design. Okay, so these projects may involve IOR or certain types of IMR. There are very few IMR which may go through this process. Environmental review for this project is done through completion of type 1 categorical exclusion checklist. So these projects do not have PD&E phase. We complete that NEPA review through that checklist. The district environmental office has the authority to determine whether a project is a type 1 categorical exclusion based on action identified in Title 23 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 771.17 C and D, or D, with condition from Section E also in some of the actions. What the district is doing, they have to verify that the access modification does not change travel patterns or does not change interchange access control in the type 1 checklist. So this is the type 1 checklist, which is a screenshot from our chapter. And then these are the verification that the district office needs to do. So this action will not induce significant impacts to the planned growth or land use for the area, travel patterns. So travel patterns related to the interchange or access to the interstate or to you from interstate. And then also the district has to verify that the action will not cause changes in interchange access control. So any action which may involve modification to the existing interchange on a minor project, if it meets this condition, then it may proceed as a type 1. Other than that, it has to be a type 2 CE. I want to make sure that is clear. So the procedure of determining or completing type 1 categorical exclusion is outlined in the PD&E manual, part 1, chapter 2, which is a class of action determination for highway projects. For these projects, District Interchange Review Coordinator will obtain determination of safety, operation, and engineering acceptability, as Andrew said. Then later on, submit a letter to request final approval from FHWA after type 1 categorical exclusion is signed by the District Environmental Office. Okay, so this is kind of like a recapping what I said before. IAR analysis is NEPA review on PD&E studies. And again, I'm talking about the interchange on interstate projects only. So they're kind of like a two different scope of PD&E study against scope of IAR analysis. This is an example where the scope of a PD&E study matches or is the same as the scope of the IAR analysis. And then the IAR analysis can be shorter than the PD&E study. So this is another example where you have an interchange modification on I-10. This is in District 3 as a part of the big corridor PD&E from I-10 all the way to the Alabama state line. So the scope of IAR should be here because the interstate, and then the scope of PD&E studies, of course, the length of the corridor. What we want and I'm going to be emphasizing this more, is that the coordination between the district interchange coordinator and the district environmental office is required, is not an option, to make sure that we really eliminate duplication of the effort within the two processes. Our Office of Environmental Management review NEPA documents, including supporting information. IAR report is one of the technical reports supporting NEPA document, as I said before. IAR report is referenced in Type 2C, EA, and EISs to make sure that the public have some, is available for public review. Office of Environmental Management, as I said, under NEPA assignment program, approves the NEPA document. The approval authority is our director. Districts approve Type 1 categorical exclusion. So Type 1 categorical exclusion, they're not coming to Tallahassee. FHWA final approval, the interstate access request relies on the NEPA document, approval for information related to need of the project, need for the change in access, analysis of environmental issues, evaluation of the planning consistent and physical constraint, and a coordination consistent with the current and or planned future development and land use plans. So this is what the policy, the memo introducing the policy say. Okay, which means that FHWA is not reviewing NEPA document. What FHWA is relying on us completing the NEPA document, and after the NEPA document is completed, that's when the district interchange review coordinator send a letter to FHWA requesting their final approval, confirming that the S-O&E acceptance concept is the same as the one which has been approved in the location design concept of acceptance from the NEPA. What I'm trying to say here is that there will be no new analysis related to the PD&E study to accommodate the new policy. All this discussion of the need for the access change is already documented in the environmental document. Analysis of environmental impacts is already there. Evaluation of the planning consistent, physical constraint is already there, and all the coordination is already there and documented in the NEPA document. Okay, so these analyses are part, kind of like recapping again. These analyses are part of the PD&E study on NEPA process. All these analyses I discussed with you earlier. Okay, documentation. NEPA review is about documentation, disclosure of information. We want to make sure that we appropriately document IR analysis in the NEPA document. In the way of streamlining the process, removing duplication, how will we be able to document IR analysis in NEPA document? There are three types of documentation, depends on where the IR happens, if IR is completed before PD&E phase or concurrent with PD&E study or does not require a PD&E study. So if IAR, which most likely is IAR completed before PD&E phase, the alternatives are evaluated during PD&E study. We expect that we're going to be coming with a single IAR alternative recommendation to the PD&E study. However, we have to reevaluate again. Our goal is to reference or adopt IAR analysis in the PD&E alternative evaluation, which means that we have to prepare these IAR or IAR analysis which are done before PD&E study in a standard which can be adopted into NEPA. Federal regulations and federal statute, Title 23 USC 168 has 10 conditions which has to be met for planning product to be adopted in NEPA review process. So our goal is to make sure that the projects have met those 10 conditions and we can move ahead and reference it. Then we have to document yes, I already said that. What we recommend is the use of alternative corridor evaluation process for new corridors. Please use that as much as you can. As a matter of fact, we've already created a standard template for scope of services for this project, so you should be able to scope it and negotiate with the consultants or negotiate with the district using that template. For IAR completed concurrent with the PD&E studies, we have two conditions, as I said before. The scope of IAR analysis is the same as PD&E study. This is an easy one. which means that the PD&E study is the same as the IAR study. The traffic analysis, which kind of is the bulk of IAR analysis, is the same as the IAR analysis. So we don't require a separate traffic analysis for a PD&E study. We are going to use the same traffic analysis which is being used to approve the interchange modification or the new interchange. Preliminary engineering report will reference IAR analysis report, and then the NEPA document will appropriately summarize alternative analysis. For PD&E studies, which have the scope larger than IAR scope, this is a little bit challenging, but the IAR analysis is a component of a PD&E study traffic analysis. It's a component of a traffic study done in PD&E phase because we don't want to have two different traffic. There will be one traffic done for a project, for a corridor, and then you have to chop the interchange area of influence and move on to the interchange processes. The project traffic analysis report, which is done during PD&E study, has to be prepared and should reference IAR analysis. Again, emphasizing that the traffic volumes, the numbers should be the same. I would say probably 4 out of 10, that traffic does not match in some of the projects that we have reviewed. So make sure that the traffic volumes are the same regardless. And to do that, you have to first develop the corridor traffic and then zoom to the IAR scope. PR, of course, we reference traffic analysis and IAR analysis as appropriate. For minor projects which do not have a PD&E study, environmental review is completed through type 1 categorical exclusion checklist. As I said earlier, the two verifications, they are more important from the environmental review perspective. So if those are verified, we are good to go. The report, which is done with the IAR analysis, is a separate and standalone, does not need to be referenced in the type 1 categorical exclusion checklist. Again, emphasize on coordination between the interchange review coordinator and the district environmental office throughout that process. Okay, so Andrew talked about reevaluation for projects involving IARs. Okay, so I'm going to be talking again the reevaluation from the NEPA perspective, and how will that reevaluation of the NEPA matches the IAR reevaluation. So we cover reevaluation in part 1, chapter 13 of the PD&E manual. You're welcome to go and read that chapter. Reevaluation of the approved NEPA document is required prior to requesting any subsequent major project approval. And the major project approval can be right-of-way phase, construction phase, and of course design phase if there's a time lag. Also, reevaluation is required by the regulation if EIS progression from draft EIS to final EIS is not within 3 years. So after 3 years, you have to go back and reevaluate again. What does the reevaluation do? It documents substantial changes in impact since the last NEPA document was approved. Summarize changes in applicable laws and regulation, summarizing changes in design, concept, geometry, configuration. And here we're talking about the major changes in design. So minor changes in design are no big deal. But if you have to shift alignment, you have to change typical section, and things related to that, you have to move the pond site, you have to change the ramp. All those major design change will need to be documented in environmental evaluation. And also we have to document status of environmental commitments. Design changes may be brought by typical section changes, changes intersection or interchange configuration, alignment changes, right-of-way needs, design control, or criteria. So all those we are documenting. Concurrently, what we want is the districts to assess the need to reevaluate the approved access concurrent with environmental reevaluation. Don't wait until the end of environmental evaluation to start this process, because we have to approve NEPA reevaluation when the IAR reevaluation is completed. So kind of like the same linear processes which are different but dependent happening there. You have to finishing up IAR reevaluation before NEPA can be reevaluated. If there is no change, related to IAR for that project, you can document no change in the environmental, no change in design in the environmental reevaluation form. So that should be an easy one. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I have my contacts. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Transfer back to Andrew.
All right, a few slides and we'll wrap up here. All right, so I want to talk about real quick about what we have upcoming. So currently we're working on developing what we're currently calling the Florida Interchange Repository System. This is going to provide a central storage location for all interchange information that is used in the IARs. Some of the criteria we want to include in this is interchange location, the type of interchange, the safety statistics, existing traffic operations, any previous studies that were performed on the interchange, traffic forecast, design plans, both aerial photos of the interchange as well as ground level. The intent of this system would be to allow for consistent data provided when FDOT and consultants are working to develop IARs. And I included a slide here to show kind of some screenshots of what we're working with here. So the intent for this system is to be a web-based user interface with a Google Maps look to it. And you'd be able to search out projects by interchange type, the county it's in. There's going to be various criteria that we want to have at your disposal so that you can filter out various criteria. Also want to talk real quick about some upcoming training. As I mentioned earlier in this presentation, on March 8th, we're going to be having our Interchange Access Request Safety Methodology webinar training. This is going to be from 1:30 to 3:30. That training is going to go into more depth and discussion on what I initially discussed a little earlier in this presentation. If you are interested in registering for that webinar, we have included a link here. We also are targeting some, in the spring and summer of this year, statewide IAR training. This training will be conducted at all the districts, and it will be a more comprehensive, in-depth discussion. We will cover all topics in the Interchange Access Request User's Guide, and likely it would be a 2 full days of training. All right, and again, to wrap up, included our slide here with our contact info. If there's any questions you'd like to ask us offline, feel free to do so. We have our emails and phone numbers included, and we will continue to answer questions through the chat box that you are submitting. But I would like to thank everyone for their participation today and listening, and we hope to see you down the line. Thank you very much for your attendance today.
So we're going to stay online a little longer to see, just to make sure that we can answer as many questions as we can today. And like Andrew said, feel free to contact us with any further questions, or if you, we want to make sure that you get the information you need. And as a reminder, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted in the website for both offices, the OEM and Systems Implementation Office. And like I said, we're just going to hang out here for a little bit longer and see what other questions come in, and we'll be answering those as they come in.
All right, so we do have a few more questions. We've been trying to answer them as the webinar has been going, but I'll read the ones we've received since then. So a follow-up question on the 3-year time lapse for reevaluations. It seems impractical to adopt a new design alternative after detailed design and right-of-way have progressed substantially.
Okay.
We really don't need to adopt a new design after the detailed design and right-of-way have been completed. As the project is moving to construction, there is no need for a new design to be looked at or adopted.
The next question is, have you sent the invite for the safety webinar?
Yeah, we've sent it out. We've used various means of advertising it. But again, this presentation is going to be sent out to everyone. So if you are interested in registering, all you have to do is click that link on that slide and we can get you registered.
Is it correct that a PD&E reevaluation cannot be approved by federal highway until after the IAR reevaluation has been accepted by federal highway?
Okay, so to correct that, the PD&E evaluation will be approved by Central Office of Environmental Management. We assumed that responsibility for FHWA for more than a year now. Okay, yes, it is correct that the IAR reevaluation has to be completed before the PD&E reevaluation can complete.
Who inputs information into the statewide repository? Is it the project manager or central office or some other?
It's going to be a central office that's going to be managing and maintaining that tool.
So we will be coordinating with the district as we find that we need additional information.
Okay. If a design build project results in changes to the concept, would a reevaluation be accommodated?
Yes, we would need to conduct a reevaluation for that instance.
Have there been any changes to projects previously initiated as programmatic projects and now Federal Highway stepping in for final approval with these changes?
No. There's no change to that process. Our programmatic agreement process with Federal Highway has remained the same since its adoption in 2015, and there has been no changes made to that. So it's the status quo as far as that goes.
Is it correct that Federal Highway policy point number 2 means that no partial interchange proposals should expect to get approval from Federal Highway?
I know Federal Highway doesn't like to see those. Typically, we don't see those kind of requests come in.
And just to clarify, the policy point number 2 does not indicate whether FHWA approval is needed or not. Even if the project is processed under the programmatic agreement, you still have to address both the FHWA policy points 1 and 2 in the interchange document. The approval process is as per the tables that are in the IARUG, Interstate Access Request Users Guide.
Policy point 2 is just making sure that we're not providing access on an interstate directly to a private development or a private driveway.
And partial interchanges are not expressly prohibited by Federal Highway, but they are strongly discouraged. So the point of that policy point is that you need to make a really good case if you really need a partial interchange. Okay. There's some people are asking to send the March 8th registration again, so I think we can do that. Does the programmatic process still have a 5-day waiting period for Federal Highway?
Yes, it's a 5 business day waiting period.
Okay, and does the IAR need to be submitted through SWEPT for approval through OEM?
Well, the answer is no. We don't approve IAR in our office. What I said and what we want is that the IAR has to be attached to the PR. So it's one of the supporting documentation when you submit the final environmental document or which include the PR. We're not going to be approving IAR. We're not, because we did not assume that responsibility. I said earlier that is engineering operation, which kind of like following the different low compared to what we assumed environmental process only.
Okay. If 3 years have passed on an IAR, do we have to reevaluate it if no significant changes have occurred with the traffic or the concept? Or there's more. Would we have to develop a new?
No. If nothing has changed, then you just document no change in the report and you continue forward with the project.
Yeah, we have certain steps about validating the traffic to ensure that there has been no major changes. So just go through those steps and do the documentation.
Is the letter to be submitted to Federal Highway for affirmative action impact the design change, or does it impact the design phase? Can we start the design phase without that letter?
Yes, you can start the design phase without the letter because the NEPA approval is the federal action authorizing design phase. So yes, you can proceed with design while FHWA is working on the letter. And hopefully we expect that it's going to be quicker. It's not going to be like 6 months back and forth, so it should be quicker.
There was a question here about the planning phase 12 budget target ceiling needing to be more similar to the PD&E target. Is that something we're able to address?
I think that's a recommendation. We may take it as a question to our work program folks. I don't have the answer for that.
Good question. What requirements are necessary for a new direct connection from an express lane only without general use lane access?
We have certain requirements in the Interstate Access Request User's Guide. If you are going to have a direct connection from the express lanes to an existing interchange, then an interchange modification report or an IAR is required. But if you will not be impacting any existing interchange or requesting a new access, then you only need to perform your traffic analysis, prepare a corridor traffic analysis report. No formal submittal of the IAR is needed in that situation.
So we got a follow-up question to that. So even if the express lane just has a connection to the general use lanes, the traffic will be impacted. Do we still have to do an interchange access request for that? The answer to that is that we would still do the corridor traffic analysis report, but we do not have to get approval from Federal Highway for split lane access between the express lanes and the general use lanes. Only if you're changing access from the limited access facility to the non-limited access. That's kind of the thought process behind the direct connect versus the split lane. Yeah. I think that's the last question. I don't see any others coming in.
And I just wanted to mention that as the express lanes manual and the guidance come, as they're currently developing that, and we're in communication with the Traffic Operations Office, and we will provide any updates or any guidance as needed. So stay tuned, and don't be afraid to ask us any questions and contact us. We will be more than happy to get you the right guidance and information you need. Again, I see that they're asking about the registration link for the next webinar on March 8th. As like Andrew said, this will be provided in the presentation that will be sent out to you. And we might be posting the link in our website too for your convenience.
Yeah, we'll have it posted if it isn't already up there, and we'll also send a follow-up email after this webinar is concluded. And yeah, so we'll accommodate you there. And I want to thank everyone for their attendance, and we hope to see you on March 8th for our safety webinar.
Also, quick note, if you want to continue to receive emails about future webinars or updates to our guidance, I strongly suggest you sign up for the contact mailer, and that way you can check whatever subjects you're interested in. So it seems like we don't have any more questions. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed our webinar, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.